Writer and director George Massimillo sent me an early screener for his movie It's Love Bro, which is currently being worked on possibly getting a theatrical or a streaming release as I'm recording this review. And going into it, I said to George, I'm not going to show any favouritism, I'm just going to be open and honest in this review. So what did I actually think of It's Love Bro? Well, let's talk about it without going into spoilers. Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to the channel and thank you so much for taking your own time out to check out this movie review. So yeah, a big thank you firstly to George for sending me a copy of his movie to check out and review, and I also appreciate George, director and writer, reaching out to me personally to check out his movie. I thought that was just really cool, and I've also had that experience before with Oscar Wenman-Hyde, who is also a good friend, so it's just really cool to get these opportunities. So again, thank you George, I really do appreciate it, and I just want to kind of commend George right off the bat and just say that it is just such an awesome achievement to know that he wrote and directed this movie. This is also played in a couple of film festivals, and it's also won a couple of awards as well, which is pretty unique. So I'm definitely excited to see the future reception that this gets when this gets kind of like a wider release. Do you want access to early videos you won't ever see here onto the channel? Well, click the link down below in the description box today and join my Patreon with memberships only starting from £1 per month. You get so much extra stuff and it costs less than one coffee per day. And I'd also like to give a quick thank you to all my awesome patrons who help to really support the channel and who are also reaping all these benefits, so join them today. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, what's It's Love Bro all about? We focus on two characters who's on kind of two different life paths at the start of this movie. We've got Bob, who's played by Matt Ventre, who has recently just come off a relationship, and on the back of this relationship he's kind of resorted to drink. He has this job in this office, but it pays the bills kind of thing, but he kind of hit like a dead end in life, right? He doesn't know what he wants to do. He's had this relationship where he's heartbroken, he's resorted to alcohol, and he's kind of just in a dead end. But then on the flip side of that, we've got a character called Jeri, who's played by Gilchrist, who has recently become engaged to an MMA fighter. She then takes a job at the same office that Bob works at. However, kind of a couple of things happen in the kind of both of their lives. They meet one another, they actually find out they're getting along really well as friends, but maybe there's more to it than just a friendship. So I'm going to approach this review from a little bit of a different angle, simply because, again, I appreciate that this is an indie movie. They haven't got like a big Hollywood blockbuster that we'll see like in cinemas. So, of course, I've got to approach this review a little bit differently, but just be also open and honest with you guys. There's parts here that I think that this movie works well. There's elements I really liked, but then there's also elements that I wasn't huge on, and I think could have maybe done without and would have improved this movie overall. But we're going to get into all of that. Firstly, just to kind of highlight a couple of positives and kind of just to highlight the cast that we've got here. I've got on my list here, I've wrote down because I didn't want to get any of the kind of names wrong. So as I mentioned, we've got Matt Ventre as Bob, we've got Gilchrist as Jeri, we've got Travis Grant who plays Marty, we've also got Thaddeus Plezia, if I've got that right, and he plays Curt. And Marty is the roommate of Bob. Bob crashes with Marty, of course, after he has this relationship breakup. And Thaddeus plays Curt, who is a worker at the office, but also is a friend as well. So one thing that I like that It's Love Bro did good is the locations and the set use that it had. Because you can tell this was probably definitely mostly shot on location. Whether it's in someone's house, whether it is in kind of like a rental office, computer space, at least to try to make it believable as to where these characters were and to buy into these atmospheres as if it's in a workplace and that kind of workplace banter that you might have, or whether it's in someone's house and as you're seeing kind of relationship unfolding behind closed doors. I like those aspects of it, and I think the cinematography of those aspects are also captured well. I also think one of the biggest highlights that I enjoyed throughout was the chemistry between Matt Ventre and Gilchrist of Bob and Jeri. I think those two, when they have the moments where they're together, in the office, whether they're grabbing some food together, or whether they're in a space where even friends are also around as well. I think that they have good chemistry. It's also believable, and you also kind of want to root for them to both have a happy ending, whether that is together or whether that is separately. So I also really like the chemistry that was on display, and of course this is kind of like a simple love story. I will say, there's elements of predictability which we'll get into, but for parts that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when it comes to a love story or a romance movie. You want to see a romance and you want to see a happy ending for characters ultimately, right? So either way, you can kind of take that with a pinch of salt. I'll also mention there was one aspect also I really dug, and I think this was actually quite creative. So in movies, when characters are texting each other, and you kind of see maybe like the text transcripts on the scene, being like, hey, what you up to tonight, and blah 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 blah, right? What was actually quite inventive, which I've never actually seen before, so I actually will give props here, is when the characters were sending a message. So say if I had my phone here, right, you'd actually see the person in like a little bubble here of like the actual human character, and you'd actually see them talk. I just think that was like a little cool added detail that they added that really kind of just explained a little bit more about what this text conversation was like. And yeah, I actually really dug that. Instead of just seeing like a text screen of this like just transcript conversation, you're actually hearing and seeing what the character was saying. So yeah, definitely bravo for that. I actually quite like that. The final positive that I've also got here is that there was also a sense of realism in some of the themes that was playing throughout. So for example, I'm sure we've all had at some point maybe like a romance at times, or maybe even if you've texted a friend and you've been up like super late at night, and then the next day you're up super early and you're like really tired from the night before, from like staying up too late, and you should really be going to sleep, but you're kind of so eager to check your phone and see like the message that someone sent to you. It keeps you awake. And there's times when the conversation's happening between Bob and Gerry, where Bob is staying up later than he should have been when he's texting Gerry at night time, and they're just having kind of like a casual, kind of fun, flirty conversation in a way. And the next day you actually see the effects of him, where he's like, oh, I'm super tired, I stayed up like way too late than I should have, and he's got work the next day. So I really like that, because personally I've experienced that before, and I've had times where I've stayed awake. Say, if I had to be up like 7 o'clock in the next morning, I would go to bed like 2 o'clock, because I'm just like, I'm eager to check my phone and eager to hear from that person. So I also think that kind of the romance side and the believability of a kind of budding romance was captured pretty well. Okay, so now that I've mentioned kind of a couple of positives there that I really like the movie, I've got to go into ultimately some negatives that I don't think worked for me personally. The first one, as I mentioned kind of a little bit earlier, was about the predictability factor. Yeah, this movie is definitely predictable, and it's definitely got like plot beats that we've seen before in romance movies, and I don't really feel like this adds like too much extra to stuff we haven't seen before, except from a couple of points I mentioned in my positives that is like a slight variation of things we've seen. There's not enough here where it was like twists, turns, or surprises, or like a shock like at any point. So I kind of wish it kind of maybe did take a little bit of a risk and kind of provide something a little bit different. The kind of next kind of point I wanted to bring up was an actor who is, as I mentioned, called Thaddeus Plezia, who plays Curt. And not to say that Thaddeus does a bad job, because he doesn't. Of course, he's just working with the script he's given. But there is kind of like a running gag about his little friend down there, if you know what I'm saying. And I don't think the gag works, apart from one time in like a toilet scene. And that's all I'll say. Like, that did actually generally get like a little bit of a chuckle from me, but kind of his dialogue wasn't like anything serious, like as a supportive friend. He was more just caring about like his little friend and going on dates than his actual friend, who's kind of like on the drink every night, kind of struggling through this breakup and this relationship that he's been a part of. And here's this guy just more caring about himself. And I just wish there was kind of a little bit more maybe support there, and maybe a bit more substance to the character. And with that being said about the character, I think there is a couple of kind of excess characters here that I don't think is really needed. I appreciate that they're kind of brought in for like the office environment, and they are there to kind of, be co-workers and, kind of have that realism like office environment. But I think you could maybe trimmed out one or two more characters here. I don't think we needed as many. We could have maybe had a little bit more of a story towards kind of Bob and Jeri, or a little bit about Marty actually, who's actually like a restaurant owner. Because what I actually also found is that Marty kind of has this restaurant, and any scene that you get, there's no one really in the restaurant at any time. And I'd also kind of be curious in this, and you don't have to really play the story, but I'd be curious to see, like, you know, does he do well with his business? Is it struggling? Is it like successful? And maybe it was just like an off day when these characters like came in for food. We don't really get those answers. And I was kind of wondering, well, we learned a little bit about Marty due to like when he goes on dates, or he brings women back to like his place and stuff, and you know he's kind of like this attractive guy, so to say, and that's cool, but we don't really get much substance to him. And I know the story's not about him, but I would have liked a little bit more substance and just a little bit more explanation, like about him, about his business, and why was it not the case of maybe Bob couldn't work for his business, and that would have maybe been a bit better of a job than the office space that he was kind of currently in, because he didn't like his job and his boss is a bit of a stickler, so to say. So there's a couple of things, and there is some explanations to those things, but I still feel like as if there could have been a bit more substance. And finally, the kind of last thing I picked up on, which I wasn't huge on, there is some like not bad music choices here. And when the music's playing in, say, like a montage scene, or it's playing at like a start of like a scene that's kind of having a little bit of tension building, when like Bob meets the MMA fighter, for example, like the music's not bad, but the problem I found is like you'll have this like really loud track playing, and sometimes you'll have characters talking, but you've got like this loud track, so like you can still hear the characters, but not as well as you probably should, when the music should have been kind of lightened and toned down a little bit so you could hear the characters. But then when the music was playing, when it was quiet moments, which is fine, it goes to like the next scene, and the music just like abruptly cuts out, and it's not as if it's like the end of a song, and it's cut out into the scene, so it kind of fits naturally. It's just like, say like it's like, you know, like music's blaring, we get to the next scene and the music just cuts like straight away. Then in that scene there might not be any music at all, and you just got like the silence of the background as like the actors, of course, then saying their lines. And I just felt like the music could have been a little bit more consistent throughout, maybe having it, you know, as a bit of a higher pitch in those moments where you're having a montage, and as it's slowly starting to go into the next scene, having the music volume going like down, and maybe continue it out, but it's just very, very light in the background, so it's still there, but instead it kind of just disappears completely. And I kind of think maybe that could have been a little bit fine-tuned over, which I guess in like the editing room could also be done as well. So overall, it's love, bro. I didn't mind. I think this is kind of like a movie that's not going to break any new ground, any new barriers or anything like that, but I still had an enjoyable time for it. I still found myself rooting for Bob and Jeri throughout, and I still had an okay time. So I'd definitely say this is a kind of movie like down the middle for me. So in terms of my score, it will be a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So have you heard of It's Love, Bro? Are you going to check it out? Is this a one for you, or is this a one that you think you may skip? Well, let me know down below in the comment section so we can continue the discussion down there. If you've enjoyed this review, certainly give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel by clicking the red button down below. And until the next time that I see you guys, I'll be seeing you later.